Welcome to the New World Order Showcase Podcast. Your host, Jill Hart, the Coach's Alchemist. Couldn't be more excited to have you join us today. On this podcast, we celebrate the champions of change, the up-and-coming life, health and transformational coaches who are fearlessly stepping forward to make a difference in the world. Get ready for inspiring stories, practical tips, and powerful moments that will motivate you to make a positive change in your life and those around you. We're happy to have you join us on this incredible journey as we dive into the world of life, health, and transformational coaches who are lighting up the path towards a better tomorrow.
Hi, and welcome to the New World Order Showcase Podcast. Today, we're speaking with Olivia Atkin. Olivia is the host of Achieving Success Podcast, and she has a website by that name wherein she offers coaching. I'm really excited to chat with her about all the stuff podcasting, how she got started, why she's doing what she's doing, and all that stuff. So welcome, Olivia.
Hello.
Tell us all about you.
Well, thank you for having me on the show. I'm super excited to be on and be talking to you. So for me, getting started with my podcast, Achieving Success with Olivia Atkin, wasn't even a thought a year ago in 2022, of July 2022. If we talked and you told me at that point that I was really going to be doing a podcast, I would have been like, yeah, okay, sure. And that was actually a conversation that I did have about a year ago. I started down my journey really because I was working full time. I was also a professor and I was volunteering with a lot of different non-for-profits. I run a few professional organizations. And one thing I've always tried to help different professionals do was grow in their realm, whether that's through getting involved in professional organizations, continuous education, or just understanding what a department or an industry was really all about, and how they can leverage their own experiences to transition into maybe an opportunity that allows them to get there. And last in 2022, in the end of February, I was approached by a publishing company that writes textbooks for universities and high schools. They'd heard me speak in a few different settings and saw all the different certification and background I have in different industries. And they asked me if I would write a book on career development. That was actually what I was teaching at my alma mater, Quinnipiac University at the time. And I was like, sure, let's do this. If we're going to do it, I want to make sure it's done the way that I think students could really use it, but also that individual who might not be able to afford to go to college and go right into the working world, or has been out of college for 15 years and been with the same company and now is looking for a change, could pick it up at a bookstore, be affordable, be an easy read. Luckily, Kendall Hunt Publishing, who was my publisher, totally agreed. And we ended up signing that contract at the end of March. We were contracted to release the book November 2022. I got back from a family vacation and I was like, I'm going to be so busy this summer. Let me start writing. And within 3 weeks, the whole book was written and we started to go into editing. We released the book, Achieving Success in Career Development, in July, the first week of July in 2022. And a conversation my project manager had with me was, you have so many different experiences, so many backgrounds of roles you've done, people you've led, and all this different stuff. You're so easy to talk to, and through whether it's just your own experiences or being able to connect with others, you should do a podcast. I was like, I'm super busy. I don't have time to do a podcast, but not wanting to turn down a opportunity, I said, well, do you have a podcast division I can speak to? thinking in my head, they bring me on, I host a show, they pay me, and that would be it. She was like, no, we don't. And I was like, well, then I don't know what to do with this. But it kept coming up in my mind, and fast forward to August 2022, I decided not to go back and teach just due to them wanting full in person, and I was 4 hours away, so it wasn't really feasible. And I had a conversation with one of my good friends who did play professional football, and that I'd worked with when I worked in professional sports. And I said, what is it really like? Do you think this concept would do well? And the idea was bringing a conversation around what success means and looks like to you and your journey of getting there. And really that came about for me in having a lot of discussions with different professionals, whether they were in their career 6 months or 20 years, of what success really was like and their journey, and debunking that myth that it's really a straight line for a lot of younger professionals as well. And that, hey, I can't switch industries. Oh, once I go to college and get my degree in this, I have to stay in it. So for me, the show was going to give back to a community of individuals to say you're not alone. We all have our experiences. There's things we battle in our personal life or our professional life, and sometimes at the same time, but also this is what it's really like in certain industries. And it really ended up taking off.
That is amazing. Is it funny how you just one day have an epiphany like, oh, I can do this podcast thing? Because I know that's how it happened for me. It was just like, I could start a podcast. I have no idea anything involved in podcasting. I started out with my microphone and my headset, or my head, the earbud things. And I've evolved a little bit. You learn, you do a few and they're like really bad, but you do it with your friends and you don't really care. And then it kind of evolves into, all right, I've got a mission. And then the mission gets sharper and clearer as you do more and you talk to more people that are just doing such amazing things out there. It's so inspiring to me that the world is changing in such a positive way.
I think it's so important. And I think it's important when I decide to dive into the option of doing a podcast myself. I'm really that individual that if I put my mind to something, we're going like 120 really fast. And my friends joke about it because whether it's in my personal relationships or something I'm doing professionally, you give me a task, and once I say yes to it, we are diving very quickly, and we're going to get the most out of it, provide the most for it, and see what it leads to. I think for me, when I decided to really look at this further, and then I had the conversation, and that friend of mine was like, oh no, this is needed. Like, this is going to be unbelievable. You think in the moment, okay, thank you for your support. Thank you for the insight of just telling me what it's like. We'll see if it really does that. I did pitch it to like 2 or 3 other individuals in different industries, just be like, is this something you would listen to? And they all had the same reaction. And then I was like, okay, let me see. I had that initial conversation September 14th, 2022. We recorded our first episode on Halloween, and we dropped, or the 30th, and we dropped our first episode Tuesday, November 1st, 2022. And I spent the time between September 14th and November 1st, well, really the 30th, diving into, okay, what do you really need for a podcast, right? Like you said, it's the mic, the earphones, the camera, but you don't need to spend thousands of dollars. I think it's such a myth. And I try to debunk this with my clients who I build podcasts with or coach them on podcasting or getting them guests or getting them on shows of like, you need all this equipment. You really don't. So it was really diving into, okay, there's all these articles out there, but what is really the ideal situation? What do you really need to give a good show without breaking the bank? And is there a difference between buying the $300 camera and that $20 camera on Amazon? Well, the answer is no. So we don't need to spend the $300. So I spent a lot of time figuring that out, figuring out the mission, figuring out the types of guests I was going to get, the platform we were going to run the show off of. I really dove into that. And then once the show launched, within 30 days, we were in multiple countries. This past week, we dropped episode 38 today, actually, and we are in 17 countries now. We're on every platform, and we're the top 10% most listened to show in the world. And when I get asked, part of why I think that is, I think it's the preparation from start to finish, and that's why I help other podcasters do that. But also, even the preparation for a show or having those conversations and making it connected to anyone who's listening.
Yeah, I think that's really important, being able to connect with your listeners and understanding who is coming to listen to your podcast and being able to provide real value for them. And when you first started, you started back in November, right? I've only been doing this since April. I've been a lot of them. So, and we're getting ready to relaunch August 1st. Right now we're doing bi-weekly episodes. When I first got started, it was just like, as I was doing them, I would post them and it was kind of random. But having, I think, a system and having a pattern for when you're posting is really important. And you mentioned that you talked to some people in other industries. You want to share a little bit more about that, the research that you did before you started your podcast?
So I talked to who's now the owner of a production team I now work with. I talked to Marcus Ogden, who has a top podcast in the world as well, the Get Authentic with Marcus Ogden show, who worked in the NFL, played. If you recognize his name, it might be because you watched him play, or his brother's in the Hall of Fame. But then I called upon some people who worked in, the medical industry, the students. I had a student who I was working with at the time and coaching. And I said, this is what I'm thinking. Is that something you would listen to? And they had me as a professor, and they were like, it's basically taking part of your class and putting it into a show. Like, yeah, we love hearing about your stories and different things you bring to the table, in essence of really opening our eyes on what different industries are and what we can get out of them. And then I really took those 3 individuals and I said, okay, we're looking at different ages, we're looking at different demographics of their industries. And I talked to one other person who worked out in Chicago. So one thing that was important to me as well was making sure that no matter the location, it was something that people could connect to well. And he worked with a lot of inner city professionals. So I wanted to make sure topics I was bringing up, they could connect with as well. And I wasn't isolating anyone from the conversation just based on the potential guests we could get. So that was what I did in research, of just being like, hey, do you think this would be a good fit and you would listen to it? And it ended up paying out in dividends because people were listening right away. Like, I remember it was within 30 days, we had over 300 streams and hit 3 countries. And I had a podcaster reach out to me who has a show, they still have it, and it's been live for 3 years. And they didn't even know if they were in any other country besides the US. And their guests are international guests. part of their podcast is a overseas element. So it should be pretty easy to get overseas listeners because that's
right.
So that was also a moment when I realized that it wasn't the norm. Working in professional sports for many years, even my producer before we started was like, listen, you're used to, name recognition. I never assume anyone knows my name, but they're like, you're seeing some of your colleagues, have fast growth in their podcast, and some of that might be to them, but some of that might also be due to the fact they have name recognition. So like, be prepared that if you get 5 listens your first week, that's really good. And then when we got, I think within 24 hours, we had 15 listens. It was like, no, we have something here. And it's leveraging what you have, but also understanding as time goes on, like you mentioned, your rhythm. I have so many conversations with podcasters where I'm like, what's your rhythm? What day are you dropping? And kind of like you said, Jill, it's oh, well, like as I record, I'm going to drop. And if 1 week it's a Tuesday, and then we don't drop anything for 2 weeks, and then it's a Wednesday, or they get super excited and they're like, we're revamping the show. Like I have a client right now, we're revamping the show and I have 8 episodes ready to go. I'm going to drop 3 this week, 2 next week. And I jumped in, I was like, no, we're not. And they're like, why? And I'm like, because think about it, like if you were going to Target, right? We all know on a certain day, Target's going to restock those shelves. So without thinking, if I know I want the freshest item on the shelf, I go to, and they restock on a Tuesday, I should be going every Wednesday. If Target all of a sudden started restocking their shelves on a Sunday, and then on a Thursday 1 week, and then the following week it's, Monday, and you go in and the shelves aren't restocked, and every week it's changing, you start going to Walmart because Walmart's going to be reliable. You don't have to think, you're going to be able to walk in and get what you need without having an issue. The same concept applies to podcasting. Your listeners get used to what you're providing. So if you rush out the gate and do 3 episodes a week, you better be able to sustain 3 episodes a week. And on those days too. So it's very much important to become reliable. And I think for my show, that has been something I've very strategically thought of. And my guest knows 5 a.m. on a Tuesday, that EST time, that episode is dropping by 11 a.m. Between 11 and 11:30. Social media posts are going out about it. So they know what to expect, when to expect it, so that even if it's not saved as an episode where they get an alert about it, they know they can go on the podcast now on a Tuesday and know it's going to be a new episode.
Yeah. And it kind of goes back to the old radio talk shows. We used to I listened to Art Bell because they always came on really late at night, and I was either driving a truck or delivering newspapers. I had a newspaper route when my middle son was born, but I knew when to expect him. And it was, an appointed time. Rush Limbaugh is another one, and Dr. Ruth was another one. And then there was this other gal who was a therapist. She wrote the 10 rules or the rules for dating or something. It was way back in the day, before your time. But they were big things, but people knew this is when we're going to tune in. And the new podcasts have kind of replaced that, as radio is kind of waning in popularity, where, we're binge culture. We want to go on Spotify and we want to listen to what we want to listen to, or Apple, or whoever your thing is. But, it's, you don't even have to have CDs anymore. But when it comes to letting your audience know, okay, this is when you can expect the next episode, it just, it makes it more consistent. You look more professional, and, and it's more sustainable. And if you're going to do something, like my intention is to do daily podcasts, but I've stacked up a bunch of podcasts. So I'm rolling 2 weeks. I have enough so that I'm posting 3 weeks out from the day that I'm starting to do the daily podcast. You have to think about it strategically. And then there's the monetizing aspect, because podcasting is not free for anyone. So what do you do for monetizing your podcast?
So there's a few different things I do, and that I've looked into, and it really depends on the individual and what you want to do with the show and how might you want it to change and adapt. And what I also really like to say is, and I like to say this in the beginning before I say anything about how I monetize. Just because I'm monetizing this way today does not mean a month or 2 months from now that does not need to change. And I look at monetization and just the world of podcasting and coaching and just any real business and entrepreneur as just because everyone else is doing it one way does not mean that you have to do it that way. So remember and keep in the back of your mind that some people are going to tell you how they think your show should be monetized. They're going to tell you whether they think it's niche enough, whatever it might be, but you don't have, I recommend sticking with your gut, because I've been told that. And ironically enough, and then I'll get to the monetization side, I was on a call. It was actually, I think week 17 podcast episode had dropped, and we had already seen going into episodes in different countries, and the viewership was there and people were really diving into it. And I got on a networking call, and multiple people, I was in a room of like 5 people. I thought it was going to be a one-on-one thing. It ended up being like group setting. And they all kind of told me, as business owners, I was not niche enough, that I need to become a lot more nicher with my podcast and what I offered with coaching and really narrow it down. And I have a business degree or certification in every business area. I worked in almost all of those fields. And at one time I joked I worked in corporate, I wrote a book, so I was an author, and I was a professor. So no one needs to tell you how niche you need to be. But they said I wasn't going to be able to grow if I didn't become more narrow focused on even what I was talking about on the show. And I said, well, the beauty of the show is that anyone could pick up and listen to it. And that was really important to me, that no matter the guest I brought on, no matter the background you came from, the experiences you had, there was something, whether it was personally or professionally, you can tie yourself to and relate to. And I got off that call and I was like, I know how business works. I get the niche aspect, but that's not me. And I'm like, if my business folds because of it, if people don't listen to the podcast, they don't listen. But I have to stay true to myself. And that was a Tuesday night, and Friday morning, I woke up to the email that the podcast has hit the top 10% most listened to podcast in the world. And I was like, okay, here we are. And I was very careful on monetization. I'm still very careful on monetization. We do run ads through in the beginning of the episode. And so I collect the money straight from the company that, our platform hosts off of. If you get 100 downloads and we're able to run 100, like one ad per person, will give you X amount of money. I did that. When we hit 10%, I didn't want to falsify, data or expectations on anyone's end. So I really held off until I was very sure there was even going to be more growth than the 10%, before I looked into thinking about getting sponsors for my podcast. I looked at it. I tried to make it very affordable. We had 3 levels ranging from $750 of a one-time fee to $3,500. And I was having conversations about it. But one thing that as people were gravitating to the $3,500 option, that guaranteed you your own episode. So 1 week's podcast. And what my big fear was all of a sudden we're going to get this influx of everyone who wants the $3,500 option and want their own show. And then we were going to record it, and the show was going to pivot to people coming on and really selling what they're doing instead of having that organic, authentic conversation that potentially, if we're just talking about the business side and what you can provide, is going to get mixed. So I had offers to do it, and then I backed out of all the deals. And that was really because I saw where the potential was. I saw there could be big money made. I mean, think about it, 3,500 4 episodes, you're talking 14 grand a month if you're maximizing that. And I could have made that, but I was like, I don't want the show to change. So I started then utilizing my show to leverage other offerings I can get. People were tuning into the show, then they knew what I was doing too, and the kind of quality I was working with guests and different individuals. And one thing with my show and the growth we've had and everything was people kept asking me like what my secret was. What was the secret sauce? How can I help them either get on shows like mine so my guests could have a similar experience on other podcasts, or get them guests like the guests I kind of had, or help them build their podcast up, or even build a podcast. And I was like, the light bulb went off. This is how we monetize my show. Just because everyone else in my category, and the other aspect of like, in my category, people were starting their sponsorship packages at 3,500, where mine was capping. So there was a space to make a lot more. And I was like, just because everyone else is having their sponsors basically, the 2-minute ad, whatever, doesn't mean that's how my sponsorships really need to work. So instead of leveraging the show where I'm bringing in money that way, I'm bringing in money with the ads. I'm bringing in some money through that. But now now I can really help you because I have the expertise in this area, and I'm showing with the show you want to know. So instead of just getting you to be a guest on the show, let me help you build something that's growthable, retainable, that you can be doing and you're passionate about. And now that's going to pay dividends for you as well, because whether that's you monetizing in, the episodes or getting sponsors, like I've done it, I can help you do it, but also I'm showing that the systems I put in place, the way I'm doing it, the way to look at it is working, because you see that in my show.
Yeah, there's so many ways to monetize a podcast, and I like to say I fell into someone's funnel and I'll make $1 million next year. But the system that they were using, it was one that resonated with me, and it was just like, this just fits so perfectly in the path that I want to help people along. And it just kind of all fell into place. And it sounds kind of like that's the sort of journey that you went on too, that suddenly it was like, well, that's not going to work for me. But this is where the gap in information is that I can fill. And that's really very special. So what's the one thing that you want the audience to take away from our conversation today, Olivia?
I think the overarching thing is, whether that's just with yourself or the people you interact with, authenticity and genuineness is going to get you a lot farther. In the podcasting world, growing a podcast and really getting started with it is staying consistent, but also staying authentic to who you are. Especially in the podcast world, people are going to sniff out whether your show is going to make it or whether it's not something that fits for them. So being authentic with what you're trying to provide and where you're trying to grow, people attach to that a lot faster as well.
I agree 100%. So how do they get in touch with you?
So
how do they watch your podcast? Let's start there.
So my podcast streams on every platform, including YouTube. So you can just search in whether it's iTunes, Spotify, Buzzsprout, Spreaker, like whatever you use, Amazon, Audible. If you type in Achieving Success with Olivia Atkin, my pretty face will pop up in my logo. So you'll see it pretty started, and you can listen to the show. You can, if you want to reach out to me to talk more about whether that's coaching, podcasting, whatever it might be, you can email me at Olivia, OLIVIA .Atkin, ATKIN, at achieving-success.com. My website's achieving-success.com as well. You can reach out through there or just go and check out the website and what we offer. But you can also find me on LinkedIn if you search Olivia Atkin, or if you search Achieving Success. We're on every platform as well, whether that's TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, we're there. So if you search the business, we will populate it as well. And I do personally answer every email that comes through, every Instagram message, every LinkedIn message. So it might take like 2 days, but I personally do reach back out.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for joining me. It's been great getting to chat all things podcast with you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for tuning in to another empowering episode of the You World Order Showcase podcast. We hope you've enjoyed hearing from our incredible life, health, and transformational coaches who are making a profound impact on the world. Remember, change begins with you, and you have the power to transform your life and the lives of others. If you want to take that next step and unlock your true potential, visit thecoachesalchemist.com, where you can find the 3 ways we can help you for free to spin your talent into gold with clarity, a system, and a plan. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you never miss an inspiring episode. And if you enjoyed today's show, we'd greatly appreciate it if you could leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform. Your feedback means the world to us and helps us reach more people with our positive message. Stay connected with us on social media for updates, behind-the-scenes content, and upcoming guest announcements. You can find us on Facebook at the You World Order, or simply visit thecoachesalchemist.com.